views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, good evening. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters and writers and editors. You know that already. We talk to photographers and filmmakers. And this evening in our second segment, we have a BronxNet employee who did a film about a health issue in the Bronx that a lot of people don't know a lot about, but it is still a problem. We're going to do that in our second segment. In our first segment, let us go right now to S.A. Olhumense, who is the senior reporter editor covering government politics and investigations for City Limits. So, S.A., always great to have you on our programs.
I love being here. Thank you for having me back.
That's because we have a lot to talk about. So you wrote what I think is just this fabulous article that basically underscores something that a lot of people in the Bronx were talking about. And it says 3 years after the Bronx rezoning, Jerome Avenue auto shops under pressure. So tell me about what inspired you to write the article and basically where you went and what you got, and then we'll break it down.
Yeah, as you know, I'm from the Bronx, so I'm always keenly interested in things that are going on here related to development, real estate rezoning, etc. So, we saw the Jerome Avenue rezoning. It's been about 3 years since that happened. There's a lot of conversation, of course, in the city now about equity and privilege and small businesses. So we wanted to originally go through the points of agreement that the city made with the community. This is a document that has 59 different commitments that the city wanted to put in place for the folks who live in the Jerome Avenue area. This includes Mount Eden, Highbridge, those neighborhoods. And that included housing improvements, school improvements, parks improvements, small business assistance. So initially we said, let's go through this list of nearly 60 things and see what in the last 3 years has the city been able to do. And we started off with one of the big programs. That's the initiative to give the auto merchants $1.5 million in grants, not loans, to help them relocate their businesses if they would be displaced because of this rezoning.
And this is really what the concern is, because you unveiled that the businesses are not doing well, and some. I mean, you and I just discussed, and we're going to show a sound bite from a program that I did way back in 2018 that said there was that $1.5 million, but how far really does it go? Did you find that businesses ultimately were displaced and people maybe who were less able to protect themselves got hurt?
Yes, so there are two really interesting points that came out of this reporting. The first is of the maybe 150 or more auto businesses specifically operating on Jerome Avenue, advocates for the merchants say that around 40 of these have closed. And I say that number comes from the advocates because the city of New York, and this is the second finding really, doesn't track displacement apparently that's related to its rezonings. So in this case, we went to yes and said, you're the agency, the one agency in New York City that's dedicated to small businesses. What's happened to them since this rezoning and since you first, engaged with them around what might happen? Zoning is going to change to residential. These buildings might get sold and change from their kind of industrial or manufacturing purpose. And these businesses would effectively be zoned out of the space that they've occupied, in some cases for decades. And in some cases, owners have passed these businesses down in their families. We met many people who worked alongside their sons and daughters on these cars. This is as much, for them, a family enterprise as anything else. And with the stroke of a pen, they were kind of pushed out.
They lost out. And the implications of that say, well, okay, a family, but that has tentacles to their children, to their aunts and uncles, to their brothers and sisters, if it's that kind of a family business. What I want to do, let's play that clip. Soon after the deal was cut to rezone Jerome Avenue, and there was a big compromise. They got schools, they got health facilities, they got residential apartments at technically affordable rates. So there were some victories. At that time, Councilmember Vanessa Gibson, by the time this airs, she may already be the borough president-elect, as well as Councilmember Fernando Cabrera came on our show to talk about the deal they had cut. So I asked specifically about displacements, and here's what borough president-elect Vanessa Gibson said. Many of the auto businesses, probably the larger percentage, are in the southern part of that area of Jerome Avenue. I think it was $1.5 million that was designated for moving expenses and helping them relocate. Frankly, it doesn't seem like a lot of money. I mean, $1.5 million for people who own businesses, 2 or 3 of them can eat that up pretty quickly. Are you concerned about displacement? Is it inevitable that somebody's going to be displaced, just from a real point of view?
Right. I think from a realistic, real talk perspective, we recognize that some businesses will be displaced. Our greatest challenge from the beginning in dealing with the auto industry was that we don't have enough protections for commercial tenants like we do for renters and residential businesses and others. The challenge is that many of the property owners see what's happening across the city of New York. And we, through all of the work we've done through surveys and different analyses, we identified 151 auto businesses in the entire corridor. Many of them had a lease of less than 5 years. Some of them were monthly. Some of them had 1 and 2 and 3 year leases, but certainly subject to not being renewed if the owner decides not to renew. So 2 of the things that came out of the rezoning in the final plan, $1.5 million, and I emphasize grant money and not loans, because that's a huge difference, available to any business that is displaced, up to $20,000 per business, those that are eligible. So not a business that comes in and says, I was displaced, but businesses that have been there for a certain period of time.
So there you go. You heard it from then council member, now borough president-elect Vanessa Gibson. It sounds like she gave a good answer, but really didn't solve the problem of that you articulated in the article you wrote, right? Do I have that right?
Right. And I think, you were right to point out the fact that, this $1.5 million does not necessarily seem like a lot for these merchants. I mean, the cost of moving an auto business is not really like the cost of moving a home or an apartment. And we all know how difficult that is if you've moved anywhere in the city. But all of these pieces of equipment, we're talking the hydraulic, the jacks, the equipment that they sell, torches, welding equipment. There are lots of things that
there's tons of it. Not to mention the infrastructure they may have invested to, align their facility to be able to repair cars.
And to be clear, the SBS grant program, again, it's not a loan program, but we find that in 3 years, SBS didn't give out a penny. That 1.5 million expires in July, and the agency in 3 years has not even given any of this money out. So we see that they would have applied for these, and these were $20,000, capped at $20,000 reimbursable grants. We're talking maybe 150 businesses of that kind operating on the strip. That's not a lot to go around.
Do the math. It doesn't work.
Right. None of it went around.
So a similar rezoning was attempted on Southern Boulevard, and Councilmember Rafael Salamanca was behind an effort. First of all, he squashed that rezoning because he said, I don't have a guarantee of displacements, residential and commercial. That legislation that requires the city to, before they rezone, to study the neighborhood and make sure that we all know what the implications will be. Do you see that as the kind of legislation that can end this problem? Or are you concerned, even with the new mayor, who seems to be development friendly, we're going to have rezonings that are still going to be hurtful to the people who can afford it least?
I think it's a start. I mean, I think, Rafael Salamanca is the land use chair in the city council. They kind of oversee the land use process in the city. So they do have a really important role to play in how all of that is structured. I think what the next mayor might need to focus, or be somewhat intentional about is looking at displacement. Is SBS tracking commercial displacement for small businesses that are prompted directly because of these rezonings? HPD, it does not appear, is tracking residential displacement that happens as a result of these rezonings. And we know, because we asked both agencies as part of this reporting, yes, you have programs ostensibly in place, but what are the numbers? What can you tell us about how these rezonings, these policy changes affect the way that we live in our neighborhoods? And I also think, it's important to say the Bronx has long been that final frontier. You're priced out of Queens, you're priced out of Harlem, you're priced out of Brooklyn, Lower Manhattan. A lot of people come to the Bronx. And what happens if, simply because of these bureaucratic changes, the Bronx is no longer an affordable place for folks to live? What then happens to our retail environments, to manufacturing, to business in the city?
This also technically could discourage people from opening businesses, because if they say, I want to open a business in a neighborhood that really could use whatever it is, a fresh food market or a pharmacy or something like that, something that a community really needs. But they're saying, I'm not going to do that because I'm hearing whispers that there's going to be a rezoning. I could be the first one out the door. That is a very significant negative development. And let's be clear, there are some good positive developments on Jerome Avenue. Displacement is not the only issue. Adding schools, infrastructure, monies to build a school fresh is a very, very big victory that those council members and others won. So just to wrap up, how do we correct that if the city council legislation is a good start but not the long term? What needs to be done here? I guess we're giving a hint to the next mayor and city council as to what they ought to do, because we got to develop the city, we got to develop the Bronx. There's no question about that.
I wish I had a crystal ball.
I tried so hard.
But I think, honestly, studying the impacts, looking at this is not stuff that is inevitable. This is stuff that is the result of government action. And I think the government could operate in a more intentional way to ensure that, yes, folks may be displaced to build housing. Robert Moses used to say, I think something like, you have to break some eggs to make an omelet or something.
Yeah. Don't be quoting Robert Moses around here, I'll tell you that.
I don't think that's a direct quote, but I think that the city should pay more attention to tracking displacement, to making sure that the commitments it makes communities, particularly those in the Bronx, that are at such high risk of being priced out, being displaced, not having access to affordable housing. We saw how that affected folks during the pandemic, that they are not left out because we failed to count them or we failed to adequately monitor displacement of all kinds, not just residential, but commercial.
We hear from environmentalists, and we've had BCEQ on this program, that the ULURP process, the real evaluation process of the negatives that could happen to a community, needs to be overhauled. I certainly believe that, because they could, which I've seen, they put falsehoods in the EIS and they say, oh, it won't affect anybody, and that's it. And there's no recourse, there's no back, checking or anything like that. I think that would be one thing that the new city council and mayor, of course, would have to undertake. That's my thought. And so I assume you would support that.
I think that would be very promising, especially for us in the Bronx. What happens again if we can't rely on the city to track these things? We end up more vulnerable in many cases.
And we'll be hurting as much as we're helping. We're hurting. Anyway, S.A. Old Humancy, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We're going to keep reading you. Now, this was the first of a series. Did I see that in the article? So what's next? Give us a clue.
Yeah, I'll just give you a little sneak peek. It's not a Bronx story, unfortunately. This is a story about East New York, but we will be looking at kind of the commitments and the promises that the city has made.
This is why we have you. Thank you so much. And even covering other neighborhoods, we can learn from it. We got to go. We're going to see you soon, and we're going to take a short break. And then we're going to talk to a Bronx filmmaker from BronxNet, as a matter of fact, who did a wonderful new piece that you're going to want to hear about and see it. Don't go away.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community,
and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet, this is Portraying. If you're struggling to afford your internet bills during the pandemic, there's a temporary government program that may be able to help. It's called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, and it provides up to $50 monthly discount on your broadband bill to qualifying households. Find more information about the program, including if you qualify and how to enroll, at fcc.gov/broadbandbenefit, or call toll-free at 833-511-0311. That's 833-511-0311.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. We're going to switch gears, and we're going to say hello to two of my friends from BronxNet, and they've been my friends for a very long time. She is a program assistant, and more importantly, she's a filmmaker. And so first we'll say good evening to Dina Valentine. Nice to have you with us, Dina.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And my other buddy who usually makes me look good on TV is Jorge Gomez. Jorge is a producer, cinematographer, and editor. Nice to see you, Jorge.
Nice to see you, guys.
All right. Usually he sees me on the other end looking through a camera, but this time he's actually on the program. Dina, let's start with you. Halima, the documentary. Before we get to that, just a little background about you. You have worked at BronxNet for a while. When did you say to yourself, maybe I want to be a filmmaker?
I've always had an interest in film. I was doing communications degree.
Mm-hmm.
I went to film school, and I always had an interest in documentaries.
And so the idea, it's something you always wanted to do. Is this the first time you said, I want to do this film, and then you made it happen? Like, is this the first one for you?
I've actually made a short documentary in the past, a shorter one. But this one, I was in film school, so I had to do like a thesis project. So this was actually my thesis film that I had to finish.
That's wonderful. Congratulations, because it's a wonderful film. And let's talk about Halima, the documentary. Why was this such an important issue for you to talk about? I'll let you introduce the issue, but talk to me about why you were motivated to say, this I got to do.
Well, Halima, she's a really, really great friend of mine. We're very close. We're like sisters. And we both suffer from sickle cell disease. She's been there for me when I've been through the worst of my illness, and I've been there for her the same. but she has a very, very interesting, unique story. Like, she's just been really, really sick, in and out the hospital. She has, she's going through health issues now, even though she's cured from sickle cell disease, as it's probably a spoiler, but not really. She's still, going through a lot of stuff that came from it. So,
tell me how this has affected you, how's it affected her, and what she has had to do to keep going, and even you as well. Like, what is the story here that needed to be communicated?
Well, having an illness like this is very, very hard. You're constantly in pain, you have constant fatigue, and sickle cell eventually does damage your organs, which happened in Halima's case. For me in the past, that was the reason why I was delayed in graduating and getting my degree. I haven't been able to finish 10 years ago because I got really sick that last year. And finally, 10 years later, I said, I have to get back to school. I have to finish.
I'm going to applaud, right? That's what we need to applaud, because achievement in the Bronx is something we all take very seriously. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And so it's very debilitating. And then we're going to get to Jorge in a moment. What did you try to portray in this film?
Definitely a lot of social issues. Sickle cell is not just affect the body, it affects the mind, it affects the family. The family is the number one that is affected from it. If you have kids, they're going to feel the effects of it. And, your parents, they're your first caregivers. They're definitely going to feel the effects of it.
Jorge, what were the challenges to portraying this in film? She's got the idea. She understands what needs to be done. When you understood this is what we're doing, what did you set about and say, I got to figure out how to do this?
Honestly, Gary, it's just really kind of just figuring out the story. When Dina came with the idea of doing a documentary about Halima, it was really initially about just sickle cell, right? And it's cool to just talk about the disease, and it's a very important topic to discuss. But really, what we were trying to do is evoke a lot of, the psychological, like Dina said, and physical, intertwine that. Eventually, it kind of just fell on our laps, right? She luckily she has a close relationship with Halima, and the simple fact that she opened up to us, and we just had a story there, and the story was eventually about her being a mom, right? So we really focus on the disease, but also really the human element about the disease, how it affects her.
It sounds to me like one of those things where it starts to write itself, that you come in with an idea, but then as you get to know the subject, all of a sudden it unfolds and you say, you know what, this looks like this, and you have to change gears as you go. I mean, that's the challenge of real good filmmaking, right? Jorge, did you hear?
Yeah, that's the challenge going into making. Yeah, you asked the challenge of making the film and getting into it and what to expect, right?
Yeah, and
correct.
It unfurls itself, and it almost reveals itself to you, and you've got to be versatile enough to go in that direction. Both for Dina and Jorge, and for our audience, for Dina and Jorge and our audience, we want to show you a trailer. This is Halima, the documentary. It's a very personal story. It's a very important story because she's not the only one. Dina's not the only one. And this is a Bronx filmmaker doing something real special. Halima, the documentary.
When you are as sick as I've been, it is hard to survive. Ask anybody with sickle cell that's had a child, and they will tell you a crisis is worse than childbirth. Your body don't make it easy on you. So now I'm just like maintained having a disease that so disabling, both psychologically and physically, because you never know when you're going to get sick.
All right, there's a taste of it. Congratulations, Dina. Dina, looking back now at the film, what does it make you think? Did it make you learn something more about sickle cell anemia? Did it make you? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth. What did you get out of making the film and then seeing it, playing out?
Yeah, I definitely learned that it affects everybody differently. Those who have sickle cell, for example, the last time I've been sick was 3 years ago, but within the last 3 years, Halima have been in and out the hospital. So just because you both have the same diagnosis is not going to affect you the same way.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just guessing. I'm not a doctor, obviously. That during this period of time of COVID, you are particularly concerned, and I'm sure she was concerned as well. I'm happy to see you looking wonderful, beautiful, and healthy, but I'm sure that adds to the psychological drain of what you're going through.
Oh, definitely. When the vaccine was available, I can't say that I jumped at the chance, but I was definitely interested in, getting something that will help protect me more, because I do have a, compromised immune system. So, and also the pandemic kind of affected filming.
Oh, that's right. It made it more difficult to film, and certainly nobody wants to make anybody sicker in this circumstance. Dina, what's next after this accomplishment? You're going to take a deep breath, or are the juices flowing, and now you're going to get out there and there's going to be something else we're going to see from filmmaker Dina Valentine?
Definitely taking a deep breath. I've had a lot of people reach out to me saying that they want to document this, they want to showcase that, and I'm just like, whoa, let me breathe for a minute, because it was a really hard process making a film, and I don't know if that's something I want to jump into again. We'll see.
We'll find out.
We'll find out.
You have been one of BronxNet's most valued partners, I would say, colleagues, team members for many, many years, and I think we are all at the TV station thrilled for you that you accomplished something so wonderful, and that is to put out this documentary. Where can people see it, or where will they be able to see it? Is it just on YouTube? Give us the whole thing.
Right now, it's not available yet. We're still working the film festival. Okay. So in about a year or so, I'll make it available to the public once we've exhausted the film.
I think we're all going to want to do that. Jorge, I know we've had some internet issues here this evening, but your work and, of course, working with one of our colleagues is nothing better. So thank you always for the years from me, and also from Dina for doing such great work.
Oh, I also want to add, Jorge was very, very instrumental in this project. Like I literally could not have done this without him. Like he was really my support system in more than just technical, like on a personal level. He's awesome. He's an awesome person to have when you make a project.
I think we all will agree with that. And at BronxNet, we talk a lot about team. That's what it's about. And the team put together a wonderful film. Congrats to Dina. Congrats to my buddy Jorge. And guess what? That will do it for the Bronx Buzz this evening. And you know what happens next week? It's crazy. We'll be back with more. See you then. Good night.